The hammer principle was a principle we used in our family a lot when our children became teenagers, because teenagers can be difficult. And so sometimes as parents with teenagers, we'd have these meetings where we were trying to resolve an issue. And so I would sit on the couch with Margaret and our two children, Joel and Elizabeth, and I would sit on the couch with Margaret and I would hold hands with her. Now, my children always thought that I did that because I was romantic and in love. In this situation, I wasn't doing this because I was romantic or in love. I was doing this because in a heated discussion, if I got overzealous, and what would happen is if my kids weren't doing what I wanted them to do, I would get on the edge of the couch and I'd lean forward and I would want to really make sure they understood what I wanted to understand. And Margaret would watch me and she would quietly hold my hand and she would squeeze it. In fact, sometimes she would take both of her hands and squeeze them hard, and she would be saying to me, "Down, boy. Down, boy. Hey, John, don't use a hammer. Don't use a hammer to swat a fly off of their forehead. Relax. Take a pill. This too shall pass." And it did. It did. Our kids are wonderful kids. They're now married. They've got wonderful spouses, and both of them have given us 2 grandchildren each, so we have 4 grandchildren. Now, grandchildren, they're wonderful. Grandchildren are God's gift to you for not killing your children. Yeah, oh, grandchildren are wonderful. They're smart like their grandparents. And in fact, before we had our first grandchild, Margaret looked at me and she said, "When we have our first grandbaby, what are they going to call us?" Because in the States, the grandparents pick their name for the grandchildren. And she said, what are the grandbabies going to call us when they're born? And I said, "Well, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it." Well, she said, "I've thought about it, and I want the babies to call me Mimi." And I said, "I like that. I like that." But then she kind of smiled and she said, "But I don't want them to call you Pee-Pee." and I agreed with that too. So they call me Papa John. So every time in the States, there's a pizza company called Papa John's. So every time they think of pizza, they come to my house. Now, the hammer principle is a wonderful principle. The next time you're in a heated discussion, just remember, don't allow the situation to become more important than the relationship. If you do, you'll begin to hurt the relationship. The second principle that I want to teach you about, by the way, before I give you that principle, are you learning something? Huh? Okay, good, okay. I'm just checking. My name's John, and I'm your friend. The second people principle is what I call the pain principle. The pain principle says, hurting people hurt people and are easily hurt by people. The pain principle says that if you are hurting yourself inside, you will hurt others, and you will be easily hurt by others. That's a true statement. Hurting people hurt people and are easily hurt by people. As a young leader, I would see people in my organization that hurt each other. And I would ask myself, why are they doing that? Sometimes they would say something hurtful perhaps to me. And I would say, why are they doing this? And I sat down beside a very experienced leader one day, and he was the one that taught me the pain principle. He didn't call it the pain principle. I called it the pain principle for the book. He just looked at me and said, John, don't you realize hurting people hurt people? Now that allowed me as a leader that when people said things that were hurtful, or has somebody said something to you before, and you just wonder, why did they say that? Why would they do that? Often it's because inside they're hurting. Let me explain it this way. What's your name, sir? Poon? Okay. Let's say that my friend Poon, and my name's John, by the way. Nice to meet you. Let's say Poon comes up to me, and he gets ready to shake my hand, because in the States, I know you do this a lot, but we shake hands. And let's say that before Poon shakes my hand, let's say I have a splinter in my hand. And it's been in my hand for maybe a few hours, and the hand is now becoming red and infected and inflamed. And you know how it is, if you've got something like that, if you just touch it, it hurts. Do you know what I'm saying? Well, let's say Poon, he doesn't realize that I have a splinter in my hand, so he comes up and we shake hands. And when he touches my hand, because it's infected, I pull back. And he looks at him, he says, oh, I'm sorry, did I do something wrong to you? Now, Poon didn't do anything wrong to me. It's not his fault. You see, the problem is I have an infected hand. I have a splinter in my hand. And because my hand is sick, because my hand is infected, I'm going to overreact. Let me put it this way. There are a lot of people who have a splinter in their soul. Inside, they are hurting. And when you are hurting yourself, you hurt people and are hurt by people. Now, here's a very important statement. We see people not as they are. We see people as we are. That is a very important statement. I'll repeat it so you can write it down. We see people as we are, not as they are. We have a tendency to look at other people and judge them based upon us and who we are. Now, I'm going to explain that to you, and I think you're going to understand it very quickly. What that means is, if I have a relationship with Poon, I'm not going to always see him as he is. I'm going to see him as I am. For example, if I am a very generous person, I'll see him as a very generous person. If I'm a very suspicious person, I'll see him as a suspicious person. If I have a hard time trusting people, I'll look at him as not trustworthy. If I'm positive in my outlook, I'll look at him as positive. If I'm negative in my outlook, I'll look at him as negative. In other words, we look at people and we see people not as they are many times. We see them as we are. Now, that's very important in the pain principle. Because what that means is, if I see you not as you are, but I see you as I am, then if I am unhealthy, if I see myself in an unhealthy way, if I'm hurting, then I will see you in an unhealthy way. That's why there are some people who just don't get along with anybody because they have problems on the inside. One of the people principles that I wasn't going to teach you is, I'm just going to give it to you. I won't teach it. So then you only have to read 21. One of the people principles that I could have given you is the Bob principle. The Bob principle says if Bob has a problem with everyone, Bob's the problem. If Bob has a problem with everyone, Bob's the problem. Or Bob better. And it's a fact that when you see don't you know some people, no matter where they are, they cause problems? Huh? And they always have destination disease. They always have destination disease. They think, well, you know what? If I could just move to another part of the city, I'd get happy. Or if I could have another job, I'd get happy. Or if I could have that office on the corner, I'd get happy. If I could have that parking place, I'd get happy. It isn't going to help. I read an expression one time that says, no matter where you are, there you are. So if it's not right inside of me, it'll never turn out right outside of me. That's why I teach people in relationships, the first person you want to look at is not the other person. You want to look at yourself. Look at yourself. And if you can be healthy yourself, you can have healthy relationships. Now, we've talked very briefly about the Bob principle. We've talked about the hammer principle. We've talked a little bit about that. Let me give you one more principle. One more people principle, and then I'm going to give you 25 ways. I'll give you a couple ways to win with people. The last principle, people principle I want to give you is what I call the elevator principle. And the elevator principle just simply says, some people lift you up, and some people bring you down. Some people add value to you, and some people subtract value from you. Some people make you feel better, some people make you feel worse. Some people add and multiply your life, and some people subtract and divide it. Elevator principle. Some people lift you up, some people bring you down. Those who lift you up, I call them lifters. Those who bring you down, I call those leaners. Lifters give you energy. When you're around somebody that lifts you up, it just energizes you because they have the ability to make you feel good about you. Isn't that true? How many of you, let's take a little survey here. How many of you would raise your hand and say, John, in my life, I have a friend who is a lifter. They are always encouraging me. When I'm around them, they just make me feel better about me. How many of you have a friend like that, huh? Oh, that's good. That's good. Looks like about everybody has a. Those friends are what you call lifters. And you know what? When one of those friends comes close to you, I mean, you may be sitting up here and they just start coming toward you. The closer they come to you, the better you feel. You just get energy as you see them because you know they're going to take you higher. They're going to lift you up. This is the elevator principle. When you get on their elevator and you push the button, no matter what button you push, they always take you higher. They lift you up. Now, there are some other people that every time you get on their elevator, they take you down. In fact, when you get on their elevator, they only have one button. And the button starts with the letter B. It just has a B on it. Stands for basement. Oh, yeah. You just get on their elevator and you just push the button, and let me tell you something. They'll take you lower than you've ever been before. In fact, you may have one of those difficult days where you're thinking to yourself, it couldn't be worse. I mean, I'm already in the basement. So you get on their elevator, and when you get on the elevator that day, you find they have another button. It says LB, lower basement. In other words, these people, no matter where you are, they can take you down. And let me tell you something about these people. These people are tiring. They wear on you. They take strength from you. They suck life right out of your body. Now, how many of you know at least one person like that? Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. How many of you are seated beside that person right now? Some of you never learn. You never learn. I've asked that question before today. Let me explain. You've had one of those long days. It's now 10 o'clock at night. You've been with people all day. You don't want to see anybody anymore. You're just mentally, emotionally tired. So you're going to your car in the parking lot. And when you get to the car, it's like an oasis. Nobody's going to be able to talk to you. Nobody's going to be able to ask questions. Nobody's going to be able to see you. And for 30 minutes, you're going to be in your car all by yourself. And as you approach the car, you're feeling better because you're not going to have to see any more people or talk to any more people. And the closer you get to the car, the more strength you feel because you're going to be able to be by yourself and you're feeling really good. And you put your hand on the door handle. Let me say something. These elevator people who bring you down, their timing is impeccable. They know when you're low. And you put your hand on the car door and you hear a voice right over there. You know that voice. They are a basement person. You don't get in the car. No, you just lay your body on the car and say, slay me, slay me, slay me. Ella Mae Wilcox said it best. Ella Mae Wilcox said, there's two kinds of people on earth today, just two kinds of people, no more, I say, not the good and the bad, for it's well understood that the good are half bad and the bad are half good. No, there's two kinds of people on earth, I mean. The people who lift and the people who lean. Here's the question. The question is, am I a lifter or am I a leaner? The question is, when people see me coming toward them, when they see me coming toward them, are they energized because they know that I'm going to lift them up and encourage them? Or when they see me coming, when they see me coming and they're in the grocery store, do they duck? Nothing is worse than a leader who isn't a lifter. Nothing is more difficult if you have to work for that person, if you have to be around that person. It's very difficult. Determine today, determine now that you're going to be a lifter. That you're going to encourage people. Hey, I've already talked to you about how to be a lifter. In the last session, what did I say? I said to you that if you wanted to be successful, what you had to do was add value to people. Can I tell you something? Lifters add value to people, just as leaners subtract value from people. And I shared with you in the last session, there were 3 things that you had to do to add value to people. Number 1, you had to value people. Number 2, you had to make yourself more valuable. And number 3 is you had to know and relate to what other people value. And if you can do those 3 things, you can add value to people and you can lift people up. Now, I gave you 21 people, or I gave you 4 people principles. You have 21 to go. So look at your neighbor and say, I'm learning something. Go ahead and tell them that. I'm learning something. I'm learning something. Look right back at them and say, but I have 21 more principles to go. Okay. Okay. Now let me teach you, before we go to lunch today, let me teach you from my book, 25 Ways to Win with People. The 25 people principles was to help you understand people. This is now a practice. We have a phrase in the United States. I'm curious to see if you have the phrase. When somebody makes people feel good, we say he makes them or she makes them feel like $1,000,000. Okay, which means, oh, they lift me up. Have you ever heard that expression? Huh? They make you feel. So the title of this book is 25 Ways to Win with People, How to Make Others Feel Like $1,000,000. These are people practices. Some of these, and let me tell you something about these practices. Every one of you can do these 25 things. So this is a book that teaches you how to make other people feel good about themselves. Such as, are you ready? Number 1. Practice the 30-second rule. Now, I'm going to explain the 30-second rule. When I say practice the 30-second rule, what I teach my people, I own 2 companies. I own 3. I just sold 1. But in my companies, what I teach all of my employees is I teach them the 30-second rule. The 30-second rule just simply says that in the first 30 seconds of a conversation, say something complimentary or affirming about that person. In the first 30 seconds, express affirmation. Say something kind. Say something complimentary to that individual in the first 30 seconds. This is a very important rule. It really works. It works on others. I know, I've used it all of my life. In the beginning of the conversation, say something complimentary. In the States, we have an expression about people who make other people feel good. We say that that person has charisma. They're a charismatic person. They have charisma. Again, is that a phrase? Do you use that word here? Do you talk about people that have charisma in Thailand? Do you? How many of you have heard this phrase? They have charisma. Okay. Now, when we talk about people that have charisma, often people think that you're born with charisma. In other words, you're kind of born with charisma, and there are certain people that just have this charisma about them. And I want to tell you something. Charisma is not a personality. It's a mindset. It's how you think. Let me explain. People that have charisma, in their conversation, they focus on the person they're talking to. In other words, people that have charisma focus on others. People who lack charisma focus on themselves. So therefore, if you and I are a social engagement. And I walk up to you. And I start talking to you, and in that conversation, I begin to talk about you. I begin to ask questions about you, about your family, where you live, what you do, what your hobby is. And I spend 5-8 minutes talking about you. When I leave you, because I focused on you, I'll walk away and you'll say, wow, John, he's my friend. He's talking about me. But if in that 5 or 8 minutes, all I want to do is talk about myself and who I am and what I do. You see, people that have charisma talk about others. People who lack charisma talk about themselves. There's a country western song that Willie Nelson in the States made kind of famous. It's entitled, "You Were Always on My Mind." Well, most people who lack charisma, they don't sing "You Were Always on My Mind." They sing, "I was always on my mind." We've dealt with the R, which stands for relationships, and so we'll spend time with the E, the A, and the L. The letter E stands for equipping. People that are highly successful have learned to develop other people. They are good at training. They are good at equipping other people. Think about it for just a moment. The only way that you and I can compound our vision is by working with other people. The only way that we can compound our dream. In other words, if I have to do everything myself, I'm very limited in what I can do. But if I can train people and develop people, if I can equip them, if I can develop a team, here's an expression for you. You ready? Teamwork makes the dream work. When you come together as a team, and when you develop a good team, all of a sudden you're going to make the dream work. Teamwork makes the dream work. This is very true. I have been teaching since 1975. For the last 30 years in teaching, I have observed, and I'll speak of the States here because that's what I know best. In the States, the 1980s, the 1990s, and now this new decade in this new century, each decade, each 10-year period has represented a different facet of business. Let me explain to you. In the 1980s, the key word was management. In the 1980s, the great management books began to come out. Peter Drucker, who I had the privilege, the great management guru, Peter Drucker personally mentored me. In the 1980s, the key word was you have to manage your organization. You have to manage your company. And so management was a key emphasis in the corporate community in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it changed. We went from management to leadership. And I'm going to tell you why. We went from management to leadership because when we got into the 1990s, all of a sudden, things began to change very rapidly. Let me explain. Management assumes that everything will stay the same. Managers don't like change. Managers like everything to be in order. They like everything to stay the same, and they like to be able to manage it. The very word manage means to control, and managers love to control. Now, this is not an anti-management statement at all, because in every organization you need management. So I'm not anti-management. I'm just wanting you to see the shift. And in the 1980s, if you could just manage, if you could control your organization, you did well. In the 1990s, things began to change so quickly that you had to go from managers running your company to leaders. Because you see, management assumes everything will stay the same. Leadership assumes that everything will change. And leaders are more comfortable with change than managers. And so therefore, when things began to pick up and the pace began to increase, companies began to say, what we really need is we need to develop leaders. We need to develop leaders because they're visionary, they're out front. Leaders anticipate problems. And so therefore we went from management thinking to leadership thinking. Now that was in the 1990s. It's changing again. In fact, in the last 5 years, I've watched it change. As the century kind of rolled around and we came into the 2000 and the decade that we're in now, the key phrase now in the business corporate culture is a leadership team. We've gone from management to leadership to team leadership. All of a sudden, now organizations are saying, if I'm really going to be successful with my organization, what I need to do is I need to develop a team of leaders. I need to develop a leadership team. And the reason for that is, part of the reason for that is that a book that I wrote in the very beginning of this decade, really I wrote it, it came out at 1999, was the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Now, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership says that if you're to lead effectively, there are 21 laws that you not only need to understand, you need to follow or obey to be successful as a leader. Now, the moment you start reading the 21 Laws of Leadership, the first thing that comes to your mind after reading that book is, it's impossible for any leader to do all 21 things with excellence. Let me explain. I wrote the book. And of the 21 laws of leadership, there are 5 of them that I am average or less. And I wrote the book. In fact, when I was writing those laws, I was wishing that they weren't laws, because I thought, I don't do these well. For example, one of the laws, the law that I'm the least effective in, is the law of navigation. The law of navigation says anyone can steer a ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Now, I am not a good navigator. From a 1 to a 10, I'm a 1. Okay? That's not very good. I'm not a very good navigator. I'm big picture, I'm visionary, and I don't like the day-to-day navigation. So what am I going to do? If I'm not good at that, then I need to develop a leadership team, and I need to have somebody on my team that's a good navigator so that when we come to navigating for my company, I can hand the ball off to them. You see, leaders are not only leaders, leaders are followers. Now, when I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, let me give you a funny story. For 2 years when that book came out, I did nothing but lecture all over America on the 21 Laws of Leadership. I'm speaking to a large crowd like this, doing the 21 Laws of Leadership, and during the break, I'm signing the books. This young man came up to me who was just finished getting his MBA degree, and he hands me the book to sign, and so I'm starting to sign it, and I can tell he's very intense. He looks at me and he said, okay, I like this 21 Laws conference. This is a good conference. I like this 21 Laws. But he said, I just got my MBA degree, and then I love this phrase. He said, I don't have a lot of time. Here he's a young kid. He doesn't have a lot of time. I thought, he doesn't need a leadership lesson. He needs a perspective lesson. He said, I don't have a lot of time. So he said, let's get to the bottom line. And he put his finger up. He put his index finger up. And he kind of got in my face. He said, what's the one thing I need to know about leadership? And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm teaching the 21 laws of leadership. I just went into the one thing. And so I got all the passion that I could gather, and I kind of sat up on my chair, and I put my index finger up. And I said, the one thing you need to know about leadership is that there's more than one thing you need to know about leadership. I said, there are 21 things you need to know about leadership. Now sit down and take notes. Now, what happened was, when this book came out, all of a sudden leaders understood that just because you can cast vision doesn't make you a great leader. I know people that can't cast vision that they're not good leaders at all. It is more than one thing. Now, the moment I understand that, then what I need to do is I need to develop a team. I need to develop a leadership team. In fact, let me tell you how we do it. Let me tell you how I teach companies to do it. Let me tell you what we do. Let's say, for example, that the people here in the front row, they're my leadership team. Now, what I would do with my leadership team is very simple. I would take a book such as the 21 Laws of Leadership, and I would have each one of them read the book. I would say, okay, we're going to spend a month, just read the book. Then what I would do is once a week, for 30 minutes every week, I would have one of the laws taught. I would start down at the end of Hong, and I would say, okay, you teach the law number 1 the first week, and you teach law number 2 the second week. And I would take 21 weeks, and we would all learn the laws and teach each other the laws. That's how I do with all of my leadership teams. I have them teach with me. Okay, now, after teaching the 21 laws of leadership to my leadership team, then what we would do is we would sit down and we would look at all 21 laws and we would evaluate ourselves from a 1 to a 10. We would look at each law, and I would say, at law number 1, I'm a 6. Law number 2, I'm a 9. I'm really good at that. Law number 3, I'm a 3 maybe. But I have them personally evaluate their number on each law. And then what I do is I ask everybody who has evaluated themselves to evaluate each other. So what we do is everybody else now evaluates me on each one of the laws and lets me know how well in feedback they think I do on these laws. So for example, if I gave myself a 9 and I thought I was really good at it and the team gave me a kind of a collective 2, it would tell me that I'm not very real about myself. You follow me? But now watch how this works. So in the law of navigating, if Hong is a 9 and I'm a 3, then when we come to navigate something in the company, we give the ball to him and we follow him. That's the value of having a leadership team. You develop a leadership team not to compete with you. You develop a leadership team to complete you. And the moment that the team understands that we are here to complete one another, we are here to make one another better. This is huge. So I have teams for everything. I have what I call thinking teams. I have a group of 8 people that are just my what I call creative thinking team. And I go to them, and when I have an idea, I throw out the idea, and we begin to share. And then they give me feedback. Let me just show you how that works. Let's say my friend Abdullah here. Let's say he's on my thinking team. I had lunch with him. I would have him on my thinking team. He's very smart. So this is the way this works. If Abdullah's on my thinking team, great leaders understand the value of having people help them. Insecure leaders want to do it all themselves. So, let me illustrate this way. If I have a good thought, and Abdullah has a good thought, but he doesn't share his good thought with me, and I don't share my good thought with him, he still only has one good thought. And I only have one good thought. Isn't that true? But if we sit down to a table and he says, John, here's what I've been thinking, and he shares with me his good thought. And I say, well, Dell, that's good. Let me tell you what I've been thinking. And I share with him my good thought. Guess what? He now has two good thoughts. I have two good thoughts. We've doubled our thinking output because we understand the value of a team. We understand what happens when you bring people together and they add value to each other. Now, but it goes beyond that. One good thought and another good thought, that can create two good thoughts, but let me tell you what it really does. That creates synergy. And after you get a few good thoughts, you begin to get several good thoughts. And how do you get a great thought? A great thought is a result of several good thoughts. Great thoughts aren't birthed in a vacuum. Great thoughts don't come out of nowhere. Great thoughts are a result of several good people thinking good thoughts. Well, how do you get several good people thinking good thoughts? Very simple. You have to have a thinking team. You have to have a leadership team. Teamwork makes the dream work. The success of your vision as a leader is not you having the vision. The success of your vision as a leader is your ability to get everyone else to buy into the vision. In other words, what you want to do is you want to take the dream or the vision from me to we. When the vision is a we vision, when people have ownership of it, now you are beginning to make progress. That's the reason that you need to work a lot on developing teams. Highly successful people compound their success. They multiply their success because they understand that they need to be developing and training people. For example, if I could walk off of this stage and I could come down and have a personal conversation with each one of you, and that's what I would like to do, because my name's John and I'm your friend. If I could sit down and I could talk with you, and you and I could have a personal conversation, I would ask you two questions that are absolutely vital to your success. Question number one, I would ask you, what is your personal plan for growth? What are you doing yourself to grow? Remember, growth is not an accident. You've got to do it on purpose. And I would ask you, what is your personal growth plan? I've been on one for over 30 years. I wouldn't even think of not going through my own personal growth plan. So the first question I'd ask you is, what is your plan to grow yourself? The second question I would ask you is, what is your plan to grow the people around you? What is your plan to grow your team? Because you're not going to grow automatically, and neither will your people grow automatically. And the reason you need to be growing yourself and the reason that you need to be growing your team is because your success is going to be directly linked to your team. One of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership is the law of the inner circle. The law of the inner circle says those closest to you will determine the level of your success. That's a fact. Those that you have around you, they're going to determine how successful you're going to be. In fact, those that are around you, they're going to make you or break you. They're going to lift you, or they're going to bring you down. They could be your basement team. So what you have to do is you have to pour yourself and you have to grow yourself and you have to grow your people. Now, let's talk about developing a team. Since this is one of the four things you have to do well to be successful, I've written several teamwork books. I wrote the book, Developing the Leaders Around You. That's one of my teamwork books. This one here, this is the most important teamwork book right here. The 17 Laws of Teamwork. Now, these are books that teach you how to develop a team. Let me give you the first law of teamwork. I want you to get this one. The first law of teamwork is called the law of significance. The law of significance says one is too small of a number to achieve greatness. I'll repeat it. The law of significance says one is too small of a number to achieve greatness. You say, John, what do you mean by that? Very simple. It's impossible by yourself, without the help of anyone else, to do something significant for mankind. In fact, I'll challenge you. Here's the challenge. Name one person in the history of mankind who by himself or by herself, without the help of anyone else, ever achieved something significant for society. I was in Joburg, South Africa, about 5 or 6 years ago, and in fact, it was this book had just come out, the 17 Laws of Teamwork. I was in Joburg, South Africa, teaching an all-day seminar just on the laws of teamwork, the 17 laws. There were about 10,000 people there that day, and so I threw out the challenge I just threw out to you. I said, okay, name one person in the history of mankind who by himself or by herself has ever done something major, significant for society. And there was a guy up in the balcony. He just yelled out. He said, Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh, he flew in the plane, first man to cross the Atlantic, solo in a plane. He said, that's a perfect example of one person doing something significant. And I said, well, yeah, he did do that. And everybody clapped because they thought that he got one. And then I said, but did you know that Ryan Aeronautical Engineering designed and built the plane? That is a help. It's hard to fly across the Atlantic just flapping your arms. You'll get tired after a while. And then I said, did you know that 10 millionaires financed the trip? Any other suggestions? You see, one is too small of a number to achieve greatness. So if you're going to be successful, one of the things you want to do is you have to spend time developing a team. Now, it's more than just developing a team. You want to develop a great team. Let me give you another teamwork law. This law is the law of Mount Everest. The law of Mount Everest says, as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. In other words, the greater the challenge before you, the better the team you need to have around you. The law of Mount Everest says, if you're going to climb Mount Everest, you had better get a good team. You're not going to do it by yourself. Now, if you've just got a little hill to climb, you can climb a little hill by yourself. But if you're going to do something big, you've got to have a good team. In fact, let me define for you this afternoon, let me define for you a nightmare. Let me define what a nightmare is. A nightmare is when you have a big dream and you have a bad team. That's a nightmare. When you've got this tremendous dream of something you want to accomplish, but you've got around yourself a bad team. This isn't going to work. It's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for me. What you have to do is you have to match the size of your dream with the size of your team. If you've got a big dream and a bad team, you'll not accomplish the big dream. In fact, when somebody comes to me, and they begin to share with me what their dream is. In the States, when somebody has been successful, they like to sometimes brag. And they'll come to you and they have an expression. They'll say, I'm a self-made man. Now that's an expression in the States. Is that an expression you have here at all in Thailand? Huh? It doesn't. It sounds like you don't. Okay. When they come to me and they tell me they're a self-made man, they want me to congratulate them, but I always say, oh, I'm so sorry. They say, why are you sorry? I said, because if you've made everything yourself, you've not made much. You see, for you to do what you need to accomplish, you've got to develop a team around you. So, I brought this story with me. This is a story of a bricklayer who tried to move 500 pounds of bricks from the top of a 4-story building to the sidewalk below. And the problem is, he tried to do it all by himself. And these are his words that are taken off of his insurance claim form. He said, it would have taken too long to carry the bricks down by hand. So I decided to put them in a barrel and lower them by a pulley, which I had fastened to the top of the building. After tying the rope securely at ground level, he said, I then went up to the top of the building. I fastened the rope around the barrel. I loaded it with bricks and swung it out over the sidewalk for the descent. Then I went down to the sidewalk and I untied the rope, holding it securely to guide the barrel down slowly. But since I only weigh 140 pounds, the 500-pound load jerked me from the ground so fast that I didn't have time to think of letting go of the rope. So as I passed between the second and third floors, I met the barrel coming down. This accounts for my bruises and lacerations on my upper body. I held tightly to the rope until I got to the top, where my hand became jammed in the pulley. This accounts for my broken thumb. At the same time, however, the barrel hit the sidewalk with a bang, and the bottom fell out. With the weight of the bricks gone, the barrel only weighed 40 pounds. Thus, my 140-pound body began a swift descent, and I met the empty barrel coming up. This accounts for my broken ankle. Slowed only slightly, I continued the descent, and I landed on the pile of bricks. This accounts for my sprained back and my broken collarbone. I love this next sentence. At this point, I lost my presence of mind completely. I'd like to debate that. And I let go of the rope. And the empty barrel came crashing down on me. This accounts for my head injuries. And as for the last question on your insurance form, what would you do if the same situation arose again? Please be advised that I'm finished trying to do the job all by myself. Whenever I see somebody try to do something by themselves, I think of the barrel and the bricklayer. It's impossible to do something effective just on your own. So, how do I train people? The question is, how do I train and how do I equip people? How do I develop people and put them on my team so that we can be effective? There's a 5-step process to training and equipping people. It's a very simple process. I have used this for many years. When I train, when I develop somebody, I do these 5 things. It's very simple. Step number 1, I do it. Before I can equip someone else to do something, I have to be able to do it myself. So the first thing I do in equipping people is I make sure that I do it. Why? Because people do what people see. That's the greatest motivational principle in the world. People do what people see. So therefore, I must model for others what I want them to be able to do. So stage one or step one is I do it. Step number two, I do it and you are with me. The second step in equipping people is to take somebody with you. I do it and you are with me. Now, as you are with me, you're going to learn how to do it yourself. In fact, I'm going to model it for you. You're going to watch me and you're going to ask questions, and this is how I'm going to teach you. I do it and you're with me. That's step two. Step three, you do it and I'm with you. The third step of equipping and training people is after you have modeled it and shown them how to do it for a period of time, then you back off and you let them do it. Now, you're still with them. You're with them so that you can help them get better and you can improve them and that you can constantly give them the little thoughts that will help. But you're now watching them. So I go from I do it to I do it, you're with me, you do it, I'm with you. Step number four, you do it. There comes a time when I have trained you well enough that now you can do it on your own. Now, sadly, when people can get to stage four, most people think they've equipped somebody. And I never consider a person equipped just because they have been with me, I've been with them, and now they can do it on their own. There's one more important step of equipping people, and that's stage 5. Let's review. Step 1, I do it. Step 2, I do it and you're with me. Step 3, you do it and I'm with you. Step 4, you do it. Step 5, you do it and someone is with you. In other words, the last step of equipping people, you have finally equipped someone successfully when they are turning around and they are equipping someone else successfully. This is where you begin to multiply the development of people. This is where you begin to really add tremendous value to the team. 5 steps. I do it and you're with me. You do it and I'm with you. You do it and someone else was with you. Now, what I would encourage you to do is literally walk them through those 5 steps. For example, I taught you today some of the people practices. Just as I shared with you a little bit earlier that with the 21 laws of leadership, if this was my leadership team, we would read the book together and then I would have them go and teach each one of the laws for 21 weeks. I would do the same thing on the 25 ways to win with people. If this right here was my leadership team, I would take the book, the 25 ways to win with people, and I would have them spend a month and read it. When they finish reading it, then on the first week, I would start at this end, and he would teach the first practice, and then the second practice would be taught the third week, and we would teach each other these practices for 25 weeks. And guess what? If we were on practice number 3, if we were on, for example, compliment people in front of people, that week, all of us would practice complimenting people in front of people. In other words, we would practice it for the whole week. Then when you get to the next week, you do the next practice. In other words, you take 25 weeks, a half a year, and you do 1 practice a week, and in 25 weeks you have it. Now, what I'm doing is I'm illustrating for you very simple techniques of how to train people. I had somebody tell me one time, he said, it's terrible because the people I train, sometimes they leave my company and go somewhere else. I said, I can tell you what's worse. He said, well, it could be worse than training your people and then having them leave. I said, not training them and having them stay. That's worse. Now, the reason I can keep giving you these examples is because in my companies, we never stop training. We never stop developing people. We just go from one book to the next book, and because we realize something, we realize that training, equipping, developing people, it's never over. It's never finished. It's never like complete and you're done and you don't have to do that again. Now, you're so good. I want to do one more thing. I'll do for maybe 15 minutes and then we'll take a break and then I'll come back and I'll teach. Let me kind of tell you how the rest of this day is going to look. I want to teach before we go to break. I want to teach about the A, which is attitude. I want to talk to you about attitude for a few minutes. And then then we'll take a break, and when we come back, I'll give you in the last session the most important lecture I can ever give in leadership. In the last session, I'm going to share with you the 5 levels of leadership that I will promise you is life-changing. Once you understand the 5 levels and how they work in your life and how they work in the lives of others and how they work in the life of your company, you will never see leadership the same again. But I want to save that for the last session. Let me talk to you about attitude right now. Let's talk about your attitude, okay? Here's what I have found and discovered about successful people. Successful people have an amazing attitude about difficulties and about problems and about tough issues. In other words, successful people, they have an uncommon attitude about how to handle adversity. They're kind of like my friend in college who said, "I'm never down." And when he told me, he said, "I'm never down," I said, "What do you mean you're never down?" He said, "I'm either up or getting up." In other words, he's saying, I might get knocked down, but I come back up. And I have discovered that successful people have an incredible attitude about adversity. Now, let me talk to you about attitude. A motivational speaker will tell you that attitude is everything. And I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm a motivational teacher. A motivational speaker makes you feel good, but the next day you're not sure why. You just say, "Whoa, I feel good. I feel good. I'm not sure why, but I just feel good." A motivational teacher, they'll make you feel good, but the next day you know why. They'll give you principles that can change your life. Now, a motivational speaker would tell you or me, they would stand before us and they would tell us that attitude is everything. They would just stand before you and they'd just say, if you can believe it, you can achieve it, and if you have an attitude, you can get there. And I'm here to tell you that attitude isn't everything. It's not. I've known people who have a wonderful attitude, but they were incompetent. In other words, they had a wonderful attitude, but they weren't any good at what they're doing. For example, the good news is I love music. I have a wonderful attitude about music. The bad news is I can't sing. So I can have the most wonderful attitude. I mean, I can just sing all day long, but my attitude isn't going to help me. If I'm not any good at it, if I'm incompetent, I'm going to be incompetent. But your attitude, it's not everything. But let me tell you what it is. It's the difference maker. It's the difference maker. In other words, what I'm saying to you, all things being equal, the person with the best attitude wins. Always does. Always will. So, if I'm going to hire one of the 2 people up front, and they're both coming for the same job, and they both have good experience, and they both have good background, and they both have good education, and it's really, I mean, I could flip a coin and say, well, I could hire either one of them. But one of them has a great attitude, and one of them has a terrible attitude. Well, who am I going to hire? I'm going to hire the person with the great attitude. The person with the great attitude is going to win. Why? Because it's the difference maker. All things being equal, the person with the best attitude will win. You got that? Let's go on. What I have discovered is this: that that people that are successful especially have a tremendous attitude when it comes to handling failure. Successful people are not people who haven't failed. In fact, I would tell you today that usually successful people have failed more than unsuccessful people. Because successful people are always taking a risk. Successful people are always trying. Successful people are always saying, well, let's give it a shot. So I think successful people fail more than unsuccessful people. And failure is not what the problem. That's not the problem. I believe this principle so much that, as I shared with you earlier, I wrote a book. Came out about 6 or 7 years ago that just continues to be very popular, and that is Failing Forward. This book teaches you how to fail successfully. And I'm really good at this. This is one of my real strengths. The reason I wrote the book is two things. One, everybody fails. I've never known a person that didn't fail. I've already asked you how many of you failed. We all fail. I fail, you fail. Isn't that true? Everybody fails. Okay. Don't look at me like that. Some of you are saying, who, me? Look at the person next to you and tell them. Just tell them, say, John says, you're going to mess up. Go ahead and tell them that. Just go ahead and tell them right now. Go. You're going to mess up now. Okay. Now, some of you, you're acting like you've waited all your lifetime to tell that person this. It's okay. Now, but I mess up. We're going to mess up. That is it. The reason I wrote the book Failing Forward is, number one, everybody fails, and number two, nobody likes it. I've never known a person who had fallen in love with failure. Oh, this was a great day. Oh, I got fired. Oh, happy day. Yeah. I just wrecked the car. It's such a good day. No. I've never known anybody that liked failure. Think about it. Everybody does it. Nobody likes it. So I said to myself, there's a market for this book. Since everybody does it, nobody likes it, somebody ought to write and tell the person how to fail correctly, because there's a right way and there's a wrong way to fail. When I wrote the book, I was interviewed on a TV show in the States. There's a TV show called Good Morning America. It's a national broadcast show every morning. And I was interviewed. I brought the book on, and they wanted to talk to me about failing forward. And when they interviewed me, they said to me, they said, John, where did you do the research on your book? And I laughed. I said, it's the only book I've ever written that I didn't have to do research on. And they looked at me, and I said, because all I did is I just in the book talk about every stupid thing I've ever done. All I do is talk about all of my failures. In fact, I'll tell you how I wrote this book. This was several years ago. Margaret and I were getting ready to take a vacation to see the fjords of Norway. And I'd never seen the fjords of Norway, and they said they were really nice. So we decided to go on a cruise to see the fjords of Norway. And about a week before we left, I looked on the calendar and realized it was a 2-week cruise. 2 weeks to see the fjords of Norway. I said, Margaret, that seems a little long to see fjords. I said, can we go for 2 days and take pictures? And of course, I've been married successfully for 36 years, so I went for 2 weeks. Now, but we negotiated. The deal was I would go on the 2-week cruise if she would allow me to write a book while I was on vacation, because if you're on vacation, you might as well do something. And so that was our deal, and so we had this suite at the front of the ship, and I write longhand because I don't use a computer, so I just take my pen and I write out legal pad. And so we would sit, we had all glass, and so we'd go up these river canyons, and it was beautiful, and I would sit there and I'd be writing, and I'd say, hey, Margaret, look, Margaret, there's a fjord. Ooh, that's something, isn't it? Yeah. That's a fjord. And I'd write for a while. Sweetheart, there's another fjord. That's something, isn't it? Yeah. That looks just like the last fjord we saw. And while we were seeing the fjords of Norway, I wrote the book, Failing Forward. 2 weeks later, I'm done. She's coming off the ship with a manuscript under her arms. Again, what I do is I write, I tear the pages off and give them to her, and she reads them, corrects them, and makes them better. So we're going off the ship, and she stopped right in the middle. We were coming off. She said, John, I love this book. I said, well, thank you, babe. I said, what did you like about it? Oh, she said, every page has another personal story of one of your failures. She said, you're just so open and honest about all the dumb things you've done. And she said, I just loved it. The reader, they're going to read this, and they're going to say, oh, he did that. Oh, he did that too? She said, there's only one problem with the book. I said, what was that? She said, you didn't get all of your failures. She said, I see a series of books coming now. Failure 101, 201, 301, 401. She said, you've got at least 6 books on failure in you. And we just laughed. And it is true. There's a high probability that I failed more than anybody in this room. But you see, when we fail, there are 2 responses. One is going to help us, and the other is going to hurt us. One's going to make us better, the other's going to make us bitter. And it's in the responses to failure that determine if we fail successfully or not. Let me explain. When I fail, I'm going to do one of 2 things, but I won't do both. I'll do either or. When I fail, I'm either going to learn from my failure or I'm going to leave my failure. I'm either going to hang around my failure long enough to learn something from it so that I can become better out of it, or what happens to most people because they are embarrassed by failure, instead of staying around and learning from the failure and getting better, they as quickly as possible leave the failure. They get away. They move away as fast as they possibly can because they're embarrassed by it. Mark Twain said one time, if a cat sits on a hot stove, the cat won't sit on a hot stove again. He said that cat won't sit on a cold stove either. That cat just won't like stoves. What I have discovered is that when a person has a bad experience with failure and they're embarrassed by it, they leave as quickly as they can. They don't want to be associated with it. They want to act like it never happened. It's like if I'm in front of you or if I'm at a party and I fall down. When I fall down flat on my face, the tendency for me is to get up real quick and fasten my coat and say, nobody saw me, nobody saw me, nobody saw me. And everybody in the room said, did you see John just fall flat on his face? You see, we never learn from something that embarrasses us. We want to run from it. We want to hide from it. We want to ignore it. We want to rationalize it. We want to say it didn't happen. I'll give you a list of 20 things you do, but I'll tell you what you don't do. If you're embarrassed by something, you don't learn from it. And what I teach in the book is how to learn from your failures. For example, I say, when you fall down, when you fall down, while you're down there, clean up the floor. You're already there. Make yourself useful. Absolutely. You may not be there for a few more days. There's a statement, a saying in the United States that's very popular, and it's used by everybody. And let me just see if it's used here in Thailand. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm learning a lot from you today. I just want you to know you're teaching me a lot. And there's an expression that we say in the States that experience is the best teacher. Is that an expression you have here at all? How many of you have ever heard the statement, experience is the best teacher? Oh, several of you have. Okay. How many of you have ever said that before? Huh? Sure. Okay. Thank you. That's okay. We're teaching on failure. Fail a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. Now, the expression is, experience is the best teacher. And often you'll hear people say, well, that was a bad situation. But remember, experience is the best teacher. Now, I'm here to tell you, although that is a popular expression in the States, it's not true. Experience is not the best teacher. If experience were the best teacher, as people got older, they'd get better. And I know a lot of people getting older, and they're not getting any better. So if having experience really helped you, then people that have the most experience would be the wisest. It's not true. Let me tell you what is the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. When you and I have an experience of which we take time after that experience to evaluate what happened to us. What did we learn? What do we need to change? What should have we done differently? It's the evaluation of the experience that makes the best teacher. Here's a thought. Reflection turns experience into insight. Once I reflect on an experience, I begin to have insight on it. And when I evaluate something that's happened to me, I have an experience. Now, listen to me carefully. When people fail, people that are continually failing, what hurts them is not the failure. It's the fact that they didn't stay along enough to learn from the failure. So what do? If you don't learn from the failure, you'll repeat the failure. And it is in the repetition of failure, it's in continually doing the wrong thing that people get into trouble. So the experience that I'm speaking about is evaluating your experience, evaluating your failure in such a way that you learn from that failure so you don't repeat it. It's repeated failure, and the only reason we repeat failure is because we left it instead of learn from it. Now let me just say one more thing about the attitude, and then we'll take a break. Before I give you this last thought, let me ask you a question. Are you learning something? Huh? Are you learning something? Are you taking notes? Have you? Huh? Do me a favor. Look at your notes for a second. Are you taking some good notes? Huh? Okay. Are you taking? It looks pretty good, does it? Okay. Show it to your neighbor. Show your notes to your neighbor right now. Just show your notes to your neighbor. Just pick up and say, "Look at my notes." And as you're showing your neighbor your notes, look at their notes and say, "Why didn't you take as good a notes as I did? I mean, how come yours aren't as good as mine?" Okay. One last thing about attitude, then we'll break. If I could do one thing for you, the gift that I would give you is, and this isn't just for you, this is any audience I speak to. In fact, I have a whole one-day lecture on this subject, and I'm going to teach it in 5 minutes. But I can teach you this in 5 minutes because you're smart. See, some people, it takes me a whole day to teach this, but because of your above average intelligence, you can take a whole day of teaching in 5 minutes. So look at your neighbor and say, you may not understand what John's about to say, but I'll explain it to you during the break. Okay. Okay. If I could do one thing for you, I would teach you how to think correctly. Listen to me. Listen to me very carefully here. The major difference between successful and unsuccessful people. If somebody would come and say, John, what is the major difference between people that are successful and people that are unsuccessful? I would say without any hesitation, successful people think differently than unsuccessful people. This is the great gap. Successful people think differently than unsuccessful people. And if I could do anything for people, I would change their thinking. I would give them what I call thinking skills that will allow them to be successful. Because I am today where my thoughts have brought me, I will be tomorrow where my thoughts take me. Today I am a summation of all that I think. And here's what I've discovered. Successful people, I studied this for 10 years before I wrote a book. I don't think the book is here. I wrote a book called, write the book down, because if it's not here, you can get it through Amazon.com. It's, of the 40 books I've written, it would be one of the 5 most important books I've ever written. It's a book entitled Thinking for a Change. Thinking for a Change. I wrote the book because my father, who is still alive and is very successful, he's 83, on he and mother's 50th wedding anniversary, we took an extended vacation in Hawaii, and one evening he and I were having a late night conversation, and he told me that in the little town that he grew up, there were only 3 families that were highly successful, and the rest of the families were average, and he was in an average home. And so he did chores for these 3 families that were successful. He ran errands for them. He just worked for them. And he said, as I worked for them, I kept asking myself the question, why are these 3 families so successful in my little town and all the rest of the families are average? And he said, by my senior year in high school, I came to the conclusion the only difference between the successful people and the unsuccessful people was that the successful people thought differently than the unsuccessful people. Now, my father told me that in Hawaii on his 50th wedding anniversary. Do you have enough energy to go one more session? Here's what we're going to do in this session. I'm going to teach for about 20 minutes the 5 levels of leadership, because this is the most important thing I can teach you as a leader. When I'm finished, we're going to do about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. I think you have written in questions, some of you, and I'm going to do my best to answer those questions, okay? What I'm about to teach right now is taken from a book of mine called Developing the Leader Within You, which I think many of you maybe got today. I think that book was here. By the way, is my friend the ambassador still here? Or did he have to slip out? Okay, I don't see him. What I'm going to share with you and teach now is the most important thing I can teach you about leadership. What I have discovered is as I shared with you earlier this morning, the law of process. Leaders develop daily, not in a day. In every organization, there are 5 different levels of leadership. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the 5 levels now as a teaching tool so that you understand the complexity of leadership and what you have to do to go from one level to the next. Okay? If I had an overhead or something, I would visually show this to you. So do me a favor on a piece of paper, okay? On a piece of paper, draw 5 steps, okay? Just draw 5 steps up on a piece of paper, okay? 5 steps, 5 different levels of leadership. Okay, you got that? We're going to start at the lowest level, and we're going to work our way up. Okay, so we'll start on level number 1, and we're going to work our way up. The lowest level of leadership, and this is where we all start. I start there, you start there, we all start there. The lowest level of leadership is what I call the position level. The position level of leadership. That's the lowest level. It's where we all begin. In other words, we start by having a job. And maybe that job is a leadership position. Maybe it's a supervisory position. We all start with a leadership position. The key word, on level number 1 is rights, R-I-G-H-T-S. R-I-G-H-T-S. That's the key word, at level number 1. At level number 1, people follow you and people follow me. Now catch this, because they have to. At level number 1, the key word is position, or it's the position level. The key word is rights, R-I-G-H-T-S. And at that level, people follow you and they follow me because they have to. Now let me say something about this level. This is a good level. There's nothing wrong with it as long as you understand it is the entry level, it's the beginning level. Sadly, most people think that the position level is the highest level of leadership. So they get a position and they think, oh my goodness, I'm a leader. In fact, I can always tell people who don't understand leadership because they'll come to me and they'll say something like this. John, I just became a leader last week. Well, they didn't just become a leader last week. They just got a leadership position last week. Just because you have the leadership position doesn't mean you're the leader. In fact, here's the statement for you. This is an important statement. The position doesn't make the leader makes the position. This is level number 1. It's the entry level. It's a wonderful level to begin, but it is only the first, and it is the lowest level. In fact, people will tell me this. They'll come up to me and they say, now, John, you write leadership books. Is that true? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, well, if I ever become a leader, I think I'll read one of those books. And I always say, why don't you read one of those books and become a leader? But they think that leadership is position or title. That's level number 1. It's the lowest level. It's called the position level. Do you have that? Level number 2. Level number 2 is the permission level. At level number 2, the key word is relationships. At level number 2, people follow you because they want to. Now you can tell there's already a difference between level 1 and level number 2. At level number 1, you have a position, you have certain rights, and people follow you because they have to. They may not like you, but they have to follow you. They don't have a choice. How many of you ever had to follow a leader that you didn't care for, that you didn't like? Huh? Yeah, I mean, yeah. How many of you ever followed a bad leader? Huh? Oh, okay. Oh, not here, but somewhere else, some other place, some other time. No, I know not here. No. You see, if you're in level number 1, just because you're the boss or you're the supervisor, people have to follow you. I go to West Point, the number 1 military academy in the United States, to teach leadership. And one year, I was teaching the 5 levels of leadership. Only I was taking 2 hours. I was teaching the entire faculty of West Point these 5 levels of leadership. Now, they're in the military where position is everything. Can you imagine their reaction when I said the lowest level of leadership is position? And they began to push back a little bit, but it's the lowest level. People follow you because they have to. But at level number 2, notice the difference. Now you're getting their permission to lead them. Now you're developing a relationship with them. At level number 2, people are following you because they want to. In other words, they like you. You like them. You're getting along. You like working with them. I sometimes call level number 2 the 2nd mile level. It's if people are on level number 2 with you, they'll give you the extra effort. They'll give you the extra time. They'll walk the 2nd mile with you. Why? Because they like you. Now, I can always tell when I am consulting a company where they have a lot of level 1 leaders. And the way that you can always tell is at level number 1, the biggest issue with the people that work with the company or the people or the leaders at level number 1 is they want to know how little effort can they give and not get fired. In other words, they're just trying to get by. What's the least I can do? Does that make sense? If I go to a company that it has a lot of level 1 leaders, do you know how I know that that's true? Because if the quitting time is 5 o'clock, at 4:45, all the desks are cleared. There's no more work going on. Everybody's watching the clock. And if it's a really level 1 leadership company, they not only have the desk cleared, they have their tennis shoes on. And they're in a 3-point stance. And they're watching the clock. And at 5 o'clock, they're out of there. At 2 minutes after 5, the parking lot is cleared. Now, why is that? Because at level number 1, people are following you just because they have to. They don't want to follow you. They may not even like you. But they follow you. At level number 2, they like you. They are now giving you permission. That's why I call it the permission level. They're giving you now permission to lead. This is a wonderful level to be on. This is where leadership is fun for you, it's fun for them, you're having a good time, you like each other, you're giving each other the extra effort, walking the extra extra mile, oh, happy day. Level number 3. Level number 3 is the production level. At level number 3, people follow you because of what you have done for the organization. It's at level number 3 that people follow you because you have been very successful in what you've done. In fact, the key word at level number 3 is results. You have had many results. You have produced. That's why I call it the production level. And you have been very effective in what you've done. Now, that's level number 3. This is a wonderful level to be on. If you're on level number 3, when people come into the company or the organization, they look at you and they follow you because they describe you like this. Before he or she came to the company, we were not doing well, but now that they're here, we're doing real good. In other words, they describe you in the fact that since you've arrived, everything's gotten better. They are following you because you have proven results. You produce. You bring home the bacon. You do the job. Now, level